He threw his children into the water while they were still alive. Then he flew to Mexico, partied on the beach, and romanced a German tourist, all while pretending to be a New York Times journalist. But here's what nobody tells you. Even from death row, Christian Longo found new ways to manipulate the world. He founded an organization, wrote editorials for major newspapers, and tried to rebrand himself as a hero who wanted to donate his organs to save lives. Was this genuine remorse, or was it his final con? The case of Christian Longo isn't just about a man who murdered his family. It's about a predator who never stopped performing, even after destroying everything he claimed to love. We invite you to watch this case until the very end, so you don't miss a single detail. This is one you haven't heard before. Are you ready for the darkest stories Britain has to offer? Introducing our new book, Unreal True Crime, British edition. 35 shocking true murder cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, or grab your instant PDF download from our website. Links are in the description below. Don't miss out. Get your copy today. And now, let's continue with today's case. Born on January 23, 1974, in Iowa, but raised in Ypsilanti Township, Michigan, Christian Michael Longo grew up in the strict confines of a Jehovah's Witness household. His parents were devout members of the faith, raising their son according to its rigid principles. From the outside, young Christian seemed like the perfect product of this upbringing, charming, articulate, and ambitious. He had a way of making people believe in him, of presenting himself as someone destined for great things. But beneath that polished exterior lurked something far darker than anyone could have imagined. Christian met Mary Jane Baker at a Kingdom Hall parking lot, the meeting place for their shared congregation. She was 25 years old. He was just 19. Despite the age difference, they were drawn to each other. Mary Jane was everything Christian pretended to be: genuine, devoted, kind, and authentic. They married quickly, and soon their family began to grow. First came Zachary, a lively and energetic boy who would reach 4 years old before his life was cut short. Then Sadie, a sweet and gentle girl of 3 who adored her older brother. And finally, Madison, the baby of the family, just 2 years old when tragedy struck, barely more than a toddler, still learning to speak in full sentences. To friends, neighbors, and extended family, Christian appeared to be the ideal husband and father. Mary Jane's own sister, Penny Dupuy, would later tell reporters that Christian made other wives jealous because he seemed to do everything a husband was supposed to do. He was attentive. He played with the children. He projected an image of domestic bliss that seemed almost too perfect to be real. And that's exactly what it was: an image, a performance. A carefully constructed mask hiding the emptiness beneath. The truth behind the facade was far uglier. Christian Longo was obsessed with projecting success that he could never legitimately achieve. He wanted luxury cars, expensive homes, designer clothes, and the respect of his peers. But he lacked the discipline, patience, or ethics to earn any of it honestly. Instead, he turned to fraud. He wrote himself nearly $30,000 in counterfeit checks from a client's business account. He took a minivan for a test drive from a dealership and simply never returned it. He accumulated debts he had no intention of paying, moving from place to place whenever creditors got too close. When investigators caught up with him for the check fraud, Christian did what he always did. He performed. He presented himself as a struggling family man who had made a desperate mistake. The court was lenient. He received only probation, another escape, another chance to reinvent himself. But the pattern was now established. Lie, steal, get caught, perform remorse, move on, repeat. Here's a detail that most documentaries skip entirely, but it's crucial to understanding what happened later. When police searched one of the family's previous residences in Ohio, a warehouse where they had been living, far from the comfortable life Christian portrayed, they discovered two items that would prove chillingly prophetic. The first was a book titled The Modern Identity Changer, essentially a manual for creating false identities and disappearing. The second was a Spanish phrase book. Think about what those items mean. Long before the murders, Christian Longo possessed a guidebook on how to become someone else and materials to help him survive in a Spanish-speaking country. This was not a man who snapped under pressure. Christian Longo was planning his escape, and possibly his crimes, months or years before that December night in Oregon. Years later, from death row, Longo admitted in a letter to a Portland television station that he'd been diagnosed with compensatory narcissistic personality disorder, a pathological need to appear successful to mask deep feelings of inadequacy. But even that admission was carefully crafted to sound introspective and reformed. The mask never came off. It just changed shape. The story most documentaries tell begins in Oregon in December 2001. But the real story started 18 months earlier, in May 2000, with a devastating phone call that should have changed everything. Mary Jane called her sister, crying and distraught. She had discovered emails between Christian and another woman, evidence of an affair. But what Christian told her next was perhaps even more painful than the betrayal itself. He said he didn't love her anymore. He said he resented how much attention she gave to their children. Let those words sink in. A mother's devotion to her children, the very thing most husbands would cherish, was something Christian Longo actively resented. In his narcissistic worldview, Mary Jane's love for Zachary, Sadie, and Madison was competition. It was attention that should have been directed entirely at him. This is the mindset of a man who sees his family not as people he loves, but as supporting characters who exist only to serve his needs, characters who become problems when they fail to perform their assigned roles. Despite this devastating revelation, Mary Jane stayed. Perhaps she hoped he would change. Perhaps her faith encouraged her to work on the marriage. Or perhaps, with 3 small children depending on her, she simply saw no way out. Meanwhile, Christian's financial crimes were catching up with him. His probation, his debts, his web of lies. It was all beginning to collapse. The family moved repeatedly, each time fleeing creditors and consequences. From Michigan to Ohio to Oregon, they ran from one failed fresh start to another. In early September 2001, the Longo family arrived on the Oregon coast, settling near Newport. Christian secured a part-time job at a Starbucks inside a Fred Meyer store, earning just $7.40 an hour. For a man obsessed with appearing successful, it must have been quietly humiliating. But Christian continued his performance, telling the landlord of their upscale waterfront condominium that he worked for the telephone company. The condo was far too expensive for his actual income. Within weeks, they were behind on rent. The pattern was repeating itself. Christian also began doing something ominous. He minimized how many children he had when talking to new acquaintances. To some people, he mentioned only 1 or 2 kids rather than 3. Why would a father undercount his own children? Was he already distancing himself from his family? already beginning to see them as burdens to be eliminated? At work, Christian befriended a coworker named Denise Thompson. She found him pleasant, even charming. She would occasionally babysit his children, later describing him as a devoted family man. She had absolutely no idea she was looking at a predator whose carefully constructed world was about to implode, and who would drag his innocent wife and children down with him. Mary Jane, meanwhile, continued caring for Zachary, Sadie, and Madison with the same devotion she had always shown. Whatever problems existed in her marriage, her love for her children never wavered. They were her entire world. She had no way of knowing their days together were numbered. Saturday, December 15th, 2001. The Oregon coast was settling into winter. Short days, long cold nights, rain pounding against windows. That evening, Christian and Mary Jane had plans to go out together. Denise Thompson agreed to babysit. She spent the evening caring for 4-year-old Zachary, 3-year-old Sadie, and 2-year-old Madison. By all accounts, it was uneventful. Normal kids on a normal night. Christian and Mary Jane returned around 10:30 p.m. They thanked Denise, collected their children, and closed the door behind her. According to court findings, this was the last confirmed time anyone besides Christian Longo saw Mary Jane and the children alive. That final image, a young mother and her 3 small children disappearing behind a closing door, would haunt investigators for years. What happened behind that door remains known only to one person. What follows is disturbing, but to understand the true nature of Christian Longo, you need to know what he actually did to his family. The murders occurred over the following days, likely after Christian returned home from work around 11 p.m. Neighbors reported hearing dragging sounds during late-night hours. At the time, they thought nothing of it. According to the Oregon Supreme Court's factual summary, the deaths were methodical and deliberate. This was not a man who lost control. This was systematic murder. Mary Jane was killed first. The woman who had devoted herself to her family, who had stayed despite the affairs and the cruelty, was manually strangled by the man she trusted. Her body was stuffed into a suitcase like unwanted luggage. 2-year-old Madison suffered the same fate. The baby of the family was strangled and placed in a different suitcase. A mother and her infant daughter, reduced to cargo for disposal. But for Zachary and Sadie, there's a detail that many documentaries soften or skip entirely. You deserve to know the truth. According to Investigation Discovery's reporting, Christian loaded his 2 older children, 4-year-old Zachary and 3-year-old Sadie, into the vehicle while they were still sleeping. Perhaps they didn't wake up. Perhaps they thought they were going on an adventure with Daddy. Perhaps they trusted him completely, the way children trust their parents. He drove through darkness to a bridge over Lint Slough, an inlet of the Alsea River near Waldport. The water below was cold and black. There, on that bridge, Christian Longo tied pillowcases filled with rocks to his children's legs, weights to drag them down, to make sure they would sink, and then he threw them, still alive, into the water below. Let that sink in. These weren't mercy killings. This wasn't a father who snapped. This was calculated murder of the most vulnerable victims imaginable. Small children who loved and trusted their father completely, who probably didn't understand what was happening even as cold water filled their lungs. The suitcases containing Mary Jane and Madison were dumped at the Embarcadero Marina, weighted with dumbbells to make them sink. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, a construction worker spotted a red minivan stopped on the bridge. He asked the driver if he needed help. The man behind the wheel was calm, almost friendly. "Just the check engine light," he said. That man was Christian Longo. He had just murdered his children. Their bodies were in the water below, and he could still lie without flinching. The discovery of the bodies unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. December 19, 2001, 4 days after that last normal night, a fisherman spotted something in the Alsea River. It was a child's body. Police recovered a little boy, approximately 4 years old, wearing only underwear. They released his photograph to media, hoping someone would recognize him. Denise Thompson saw the flyer and felt her blood run cold. She recognized that face. It was Zachary Longo, the little boy she had babysat just days earlier. December 22nd. Divers found 3-year-old Sadie. A pillowcase filled with rocks was still tied to her small body, the weight her father had used to sink her. Meanwhile, at the Embarcadero Marina, a harbor master noticed a broken pipe beneath a dock. When divers investigated, they discovered 2 suitcases. December 27th. The suitcases were opened. Inside were Mary Jane and 2-year-old Madison. Dumbbells had been packed inside to weigh them down. An entire family, a mother and her 3 children, had been murdered and disposed of like garbage. The community was devastated. And Christian Longo? He was already in Mexico, partying on the beach. While search teams recovered his family's bodies, Christian was living his fantasy life. He had prepared carefully. At his workplace, investigators found obituaries with Social Security numbers written on them, identities stolen from the dead. He had also stolen credit card information from a customer receipt. He told co-workers that Mary Jane had left him, that she was having an affair. In a particularly cruel twist, he suggested Madison might not be his biological child, deflecting blame onto his dead wife. Using stolen identities and credit card numbers, Christian flew to Mexico. In the beach town of Tulum near Cancun, he checked into a seaside resort. He hit the beach during the day while his children's bodies were being examined by medical examiners 2,000 miles away. He got drunk at nightclubs. He romanced a German tourist. His family was dead. His children had drowned with rocks tied to their legs, and Christian Longo was having the time of his life. He introduced himself to people as Michael Finkel, a writer for the New York Times. There was a real Michael Finkel, an actual journalist who had just been fired from the Times for fabricating elements of a story. So Christian Longo, a man built entirely of lies, had stolen the identity of a journalist who had just been caught lying. One con man borrowing the name of another disgraced liar. The irony was almost poetic. Christian played the role with gusto, the sophisticated New York intellectual enjoying an exotic adventure. He basked in the respect that the Times name commanded. On January 11, 2002, the FBI placed Christian Longo on its 10 most wanted list, alongside Osama bin Laden. 2 days later, Canadian tourists recognized him from media coverage. On January 13th, FBI agents and Mexican police arrested him in Tulum without incident. The party was finally over, or so everyone thought. Christian Longo was extradited to Oregon to face justice. The charges, multiple counts of aggravated murder. At trial, Longo made a stunning move. He pleaded guilty to murdering Mary Jane and Madison, but maintained innocence in Zachary and Sadie's deaths. His defense? He claimed Mary Jane had killed the 2 older children. According to his version, he came home to find his wife had murdered their son and daughter. In shock, he killed Mary Jane. Then he strangled Madison because he felt hopeless for the motherless toddler. The obscenity of this strategy cannot be overstated. Christian Longo murdered his wife, and then tried to paint her as a child killer. He attempted to destroy her reputation even after destroying her life. He was using her corpse as a legal shield. The prosecution demolished his story. They presented forensic evidence showing all 4 victims died in ways consistent with Christian being the killer. They highlighted his immediate flight to Mexico, his beach partying, his total lack of grief. They documented his pattern of lies and stolen identities. What kind of man, prosecutors asked, discovers his wife has murdered his children and responds by partying in Cancun? The jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Christian Longo was sentenced to death. But even from death row, the manipulation continued. Here's the part of the story almost nobody covers, and it reveals who Christian Longo really was. In March 2011, Longo published an editorial in the New York Times titled "Giving Life After Death Row." He wrote, "8 years ago, I was sentenced to death for the murders of my wife and 3 children. I am guilty. There is no way to atone for my crimes, but I believe that a profound benefit to society can come from my circumstances." He announced he wanted to donate his organs after execution. He founded an organization called GAVE, Gifts of Anatomical Value from Everyone. He built a website, created a Facebook page, and lobbied state officials. On its surface, this might seem like genuine redemption, a monster trying to do something good with whatever life remained. But critics saw through it immediately. Consider the pattern of Christian Longo's life. He had always crafted personas to win admiration. First, the devoted husband, then the successful businessman, then the sophisticated journalist, now the reformed humanitarian. Each persona was calculated to make him look good. Each was designed to elicit admiration. Was this any different? The real Michael Finkel, whose identity Longo had stolen, actually helped him promote the organ donation campaign. Even Finkel's wife was disturbed by the relationship, uncomfortable with her husband's connection to a man who had murdered 3 children. And here's what sealed it. Prison records revealed Longo's manipulation hadn't stopped at organ donation. According to Finkel's reporting in Esquire magazine, Longo made money in prison by writing explicit sexual letters to men on the outside who paid him for the content. Prisoners call these paying correspondents ATMs, automated sources of cash. Christian Longo, the devoted family man, was now writing pornography for profit. He also reportedly continued lying to other inmates, telling them he was a successful stock trader, maintaining the fiction of success even among convicted criminals. The man who murdered his family because he couldn't stand being seen as a failure was still constructing false identities, still performing for audiences, still conning everyone around him, even from behind bars. In December 2022, Oregon Governor Kate Brown commuted all death sentences in the state to life without parole. Christian Longo will never be executed. He will never donate his organs. He remains in prison today, serving life without possibility of release. But if history is any guide, he's probably still lying to someone. The performance never ends. The Longo case forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about human nature. Some people are not who they appear to be. Christian Longo fooled everyone. He fooled Mary Jane, who loved him despite his cruelty. He fooled co-workers who thought he was a nice guy. He fooled his community. He even fooled a journalist who should have known better. He performed the role of devoted husband and loving father while secretly resenting his children for existing. He smiled for family photos while planning to dispose of them like garbage. And even after being caught, convicted, and sentenced to death, he found new audiences to manipulate, new narratives to construct, new masks to wear, the organ donation campaign, the letters, the interviews, every action designed to rehabilitate his image. So here's the question. Was his organ donation campaign a genuine attempt at redemption? Or was it simply the final performance of a man who could never stop pretending? Leave your opinion in the comments. We can debate, but always with the respect that everyone deserves. Again, I remind you to subscribe and leave a like to let me know that my work is to your liking. Good night, until next time.